Essentially, the Takaful comes from the root word kafala, which is to bind. And this originates in the idea that mutual help and assistance to people in difficulties is part of our duties. In conventional forums, this has been carried out by what we know as insurance. However, for the Sharia aspects, insurance presents a problem because it is an uncertain activity and therefore involves gharar, which is uncertainty, and maysir, which is kind of speculation. At the same time, the assets of insurance companies are invested in all kinds of assets, including assets having riba in them. So in order to remove all these three issues, a new structure was developed, which is called Takaful, under the concept of very, very similar concept to a mutual or cooperative insurance model, in which there is a risk pool and in which contributors share the risks. Sharia scholars argue that by doing so, we remove the requirement for abstaining from gharar and maysir, and obviously if you invest your assets in Sharia compliant assets, then you come to a framework which allows you to operate kind of insurance in Sharia framework. So Takaful is the Islamic variant of insurance.
Just to enhance with some background information, that modern day Takaful came about in it's argumentative, but between Sudan, Malaysia and Saudi Arabia in the late 70s. In 85 there was a Fiqh Academy resolution which declared that conventional insurance as we know it was haram, and that the concept of Sharia compliant insurance, didn't use the word takaful, was acceptable. And within the framework that Brother Iqbal has mentioned, we have the notion that the risk premium is paid by tabarru, a charitable donation, which forgives the uncertainty, the gharar, which exists in takaful and exists in conventional insurance. But the ability to term the actuarially derived risk premium as tabarru allows the forgiveness of the uncertainty. The takaful principle of not investing in Islamic non-Islamic investments is very important, but equally important is the concept of risk transfer. In insurance, a client pays a premium, the risk is transferred to the insurance company, and any profit or loss from that is at the insurance company's benefit or loss. In modern day takaful, we have what the IFSB has referred to as a hybrid principle, which is the operator operating under an Islamic tenets, Islamic financial conditions, and the mutual pool, as explained by Brother Iqbal, between the participants. But the risk is never transferred from the pool to the operator. The risk is always retained within the pool between the participants. So there are differences with conventional insurance. There are differences with cooperative and mutual insurance, and there are aspects of each which are acceptable in Islam within takaful.
Yes, as you may well understand, that there are several parameters which we need to consider here. The first one is the need for takaful. Obviously, if you are very poor, you don't have assets, and therefore the need for takaful is small. So one of the key factors is growth in the GDP of countries, which drives what we call insurance penetration rates or Takaful penetration rates as well. The second part is that in some societies, even today, where there is a much more family setting, a lot of what we will call insurance or Takaful needs are taken care of by the larger family, so there is no need to have things like life insurance or other things. Here again, as the number of people working as salaried workers increases, you find the requirement for life Takaful or family Takaful, pensions, all kinds of other things coming into play. So if you put all those together, over the last 25 years or 30 years, as Dawood said, where we had the beginnings of the contemporary Takaful and Islamic finance institutions, countries like Malaysia, which have transformed themselves from essentially rural societies to largely urban societies, have seen an increase in the requirement for Takaful and insurance facilities, and therefore they have been much more successful in promoting it. Obviously, this has needed a lot of enabling support from the regulators in those countries as well. But given that, they have made a lot of progress. Other countries are beginning to follow. Countries in the GCC, Saudi Arabia, and so on, as this kind of factors build up, are also gaining momentum. However, there is a residual issue. If you look at insurance penetration rates in non-Muslim countries and compared to Muslim countries at the same level of economic prosperity, you see that some Muslim countries are far behind. That shows that Muslims are still distrustful of the idea of Takaful, of the idea of insurance, really, Takaful, especially what we call life Takaful. And you will see that in Malaysia, they have actually branded life Takaful as family Takaful to make sure that this kind of innate resistance to betting with God, if you like, in terms of life insurance, is properly put in its context. And once that is done, family Takaful provides a much bigger scope than other parts of insurance, because that's a long-term program and large numbers of people can participate in it. To sum up, in terms of the growth over the last 30 years, 40 years, I would say Malaysia is the leader, but other countries like Saudi Arabia, the GCC countries, if you consider countries like Iran and so on, who have themselves said their systems are Islamic to be participating, then we have large pools of the Takaful monies. The Ernst & Young report, annual World Takaful report, is now showing that we have anything between 10 to 12 billion dollars of annual contributions in Takaful companies, with over 250 Takaful companies in the world, and the emergence of a large and growing Takaful provision as well.
Well, Lavala, I was in conventional life insurance, and there were regulatory movements to encapsulate these businesses within the banking industry. And a bank that we approached to take on a conventional business we had said, that's fine, but it's not Islamic. We want to do Islamic insurance. So in I think it was 1997, 1998, they approached me some months later and said, would you like to develop a Takaful operation for us? And I honestly had no idea, this was 15 years ago, what Takaful was. A visit to Malaysia changed all of that. One has to give Malaysia credit, as Brother Iqbal has done, on creating the modern day Takaful environment. Yes, a lot of it on the composite side, leaning towards general Takaful in perhaps the mortgage business 10, 15 years ago, but the last 5 or 6 years has seen a dramatic increase in what we know as family Takaful, similar to conventional insurance savings protection products in Malaysia. My visit to Malaysia was like a life-changing experience, whereby I clearly understood the opportunity for selling Islamic insurance to Muslims, specifically in Saudi Arabia. There was a door that could be opened if one developed the family Takaful operation correctly. And this was proven to be absolutely correct, with a very significant development backed by a unique Takaful IT software which we developed with the Malaysian contractor to ensure that no client that paid 1 penny into a Takaful contract would ever fear not having the correct accounting record of every premium, every switch, every change, every access to funds, that everything would be clearly and documented and historically correct. Right? We found that by working with a Sharia board, ensuring that the products and the concept and the contracts were Islamic, and then interestingly adopting modern conventional sales approach with a team of agents, right, going out to the clients, because nobody buys Takaful unless it's compulsory, and life Takaful, family Takaful is not compulsory. You have the same objections you have on conventional insurance. By creating a sales environment attached to a Sharia compliant, acceptable family Takaful product range, we found the acceptance in Saudi Arabia and the take-up of the products proved exceptional. So got into the business by default when I was asked to move from conventional to Islamic, and being a British Muslim, I'm sure that's why I was originally approached, because I knew nothing about Takaful, and then researching it very, very deeply over a number of years, both the existing models in Malaysia and how to approach it in terms of developing for the future. Wakala being a prime example. We were the first that utilised Wakala in the family Takaful industry, not Mudaraba. Right? This led to a very successful development of family Takaful in Saudi Arabia. Yes, we're often asked to have an international regulatory body, and yet those of us in the industry would be quite happy to have national bodies. We've seen this in Malaysia with Bank Negara, with centralized Sharia boards that the individual Sharia boards attached to the Takaful operations must report to. So this has allowed a standardization of Sharia decisions and a movement away from the pluralism that we know exists within the Sharia environment for different Sharia boards to make different decisions. So one can hold up Bank Negara in Malaysia as a very, very good example of moving the Takaful industry forward, of challenging the Takaful industry, of ensuring when issues arise that the regulator involves himself in the issues. We've seen this in some way in Bahrain, where Bahrain has adopted a Takaful set of regulations. We're hearing that the UAE will develop along those lines. We know that Pakistan is adopting this, albeit that Pakistan adopts a Waqf model rather than Mudaraba or Wakala. And certainly Sudan, we know it has been all Islamic. In Saudi Arabia, we have the cooperative insurance laws, which is Iqbal had mentioned with the Ernst Young report, there are some questions being raised, but SAMA is a regulator, certainly with my experience in the past, has been very, very supportive of the Takaful industry. But some questions are being raised at the moment, which there needs to be a much clearer understanding of the cooperative insurance regulations and how Saudi Arabia is applying them before anybody can comment further, I believe. But to summarize, the development of Takaful relies very heavily on the national regulatory arrangements that are in place, where the regulator either adopts Takaful along with conventional as twin regulations, or where they adopt the allowing of Takaful to operate within the existing regulations. This gives a added impetus to the development of Takaful.
I don't see regulatory issues as a major obstacle. I think, as Brother Dawood says, regulators generally can be made to be sympathetic. It's the business. And one of the big challenges for Takaful operators now is asset management, because certain classes of assets are not available to Islamic asset managers, except for Malaysia. In Malaysia, we have an active Islamic money market which allows proper asset management. In other countries, we don't have. So this gives the operators slightly bigger problem in terms of delivering returns comparable to their conventional counterparts. And we saw during this last boom that a lot of them concentrated on the property class, and therefore when the property class had a fall, they had problems. So I think this is one of the external challenges, if you like. It's not a regulatory challenge, but it's a challenge of the business, and it's a challenge of Islamic finance as a whole, which is being addressed. As you can see, the number of sukuk issuances this year, alhamdulillah, is already twice last year's amount and growing, which is what is needed to create a bond equivalent class. Those of you who understand Takaful or insurance, you will know that insurance funds or participant pools have predominantly to be invested in liquid or near liquid assets. They can't be overall in riskier assets. And so the availability of these classes is very, very important for the further growth of the Takaful.
What we've seen over the past year and a half, which needs to be looked at, and which is being looked at, is the Takaful industry. Now let's recognize that the Takaful industry was very new outside Malaysia 10, 12 years ago, and we had a chicken and an egg situation. You can't have Takaful till you have a sufficient capacity of Takaful operators to pay into Takaful. So certainly in the case of the operation that I undertook, we had a darura, an exception from the Sharia board to use conventional reinsurance, although we did adopt it on as much and as close to a Takaful basis as possible by taking no investment returns from it, until sufficient Takaful existed. Now this has been debated in conferences throughout the world now, and we now have Swiss Takaful, Munich Takaful, Hanover Takaful, Best Takaful, Takaful Re. We have, in terms of non-commercial lines, let's leave oil fields and ships and planes to one side. In terms of family Takaful, we have good capacity. And in terms of the family Takaful, there's very little reason why family Takaful operators now should not adopt one of the Islamic Takaful operators. And I think the problem is less a problem for the family takaful than it is for general takaful. And my only comment on general takaful would be this on the re-takaful industry. We are told by the re-takaful industry that the general takaful operators outside Malaysia, because Bank Negara has recognised this problem and has brought in regulations and has changed it, are trying to run their GI takaful operations on a conventional basis and looking to apply very high wakala fees, looking to seek re-takaful commission as they would reinsurance commission, and looking for their business not to be pooled. And re-takaful is, as a business, is a pooling of the takaful business. So what I see as an issue that is now recognised and now needs to be debated and resolved is the use by re-takaful on a non-commercial basis. There was still a need for support from the conventional insurance business on the commercial side. But in terms of motor, property, medical, on the GI side and on the family side for the protection, I believe these companies are well established and can provide the opportunity to us. So unless an operator has taken a Darura decision from their Sharia board at some point in the past to use conventional, right, they really, really should be using Islamic now and going back to their Sharia board and telling them we can move from conventional and we can move to Islamic, making the Sharia board and the participants very happy.